All right, thank you very much. And now, without any further ado, we're going to begin our evening session, and I'm going to turn the mic over to Norm Seeley, who is going to let us know what's going to be happening this evening. Norm.
Thank you very much. Good evening, friends. I am going to work probably from notes so that I don't wander off topic and go where you don't need us to go. This is important, and I think potentially quite transformative for us all, and so I want you to get the best use of this time. I begin by acknowledging that we are grateful to be on this territory, and we need to acknowledge the elders and the residential school and intergenerational survivors who are with us today. As we explore our theme this evening, after our keynote speaker, who will likely take your breath away, we will be running a slideshow that highlights a few key statements from the United Church in the past 30 years and some pictures of important events in our reconciliation journey since General Council 42. And on your table, you may already have found, or you will find now, copies of the United Church's apologies to Indigenous peoples and the Indigenous Church's response, as well as buttons featuring the artwork of Mervyn Meekus. The United Church was gifted with this artwork in 1986 as it considered an apology to Indigenous peoples. This image has remained with us for more than 30 years, a reminder that the journey we are on together, the journey of being good relations, is not yet complete. So these are gifts for you to mark the beginning of our next phase of our journey together as Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples within the United Church of Canada. It's a journey that we understand to be encapsulated in the call within Remit 1 to live in covenant with Mother Earth and all my relations. It's a journey of accompaniment for the non-Indigenous church as the Indigenous church defines its own path and future. How do we walk faithfully together? And what does that look like? Containing both risk and hope, it's a journey towards being good relations. And it's not a new journey, and many of you know that, but some of us aren't always aware. It's not a new journey. In November of 1985, Alberta Billy told the General Council executive that the church owed Indigenous peoples an apology for the way it had treated them, their cultures, and their spiritualities. In August of 1986, moderator Bob Smith delivered an apology on behalf of the church to the elders meeting alongside General Council. In 1988, the All-Native Circle Conference acknowledged the apology and the spirit in which it was made, but did not accept it. Instead, it asked the church to live out its words in action. Another apology to former students of residential schools, their families, and communities was given in 1998 as the United Church and other denominations realized that they had to reckon with and atone for their past actions. This reckoning was painful for all. None more so than for those directly or intergenerationally impacted by residential schools. And ultimately, it resulted in the Indian Residential Schools Settlement Agreement, one pillar of which was the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, TRC, a 7-year process of truth-telling that would lead, hopefully, to a new relationship based on equity, mutuality, and respect. A roadmap to achieve this was outlined in the TRC's 94 calls to action. Central to that is the adoption of the principles, norms, and standards of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as the framework for reconciliation. These principles, norms, and standards are the rights to self-determination, participation in decision-making, spiritual identity, lands and resources, free and prior and informed consent, and freedom from discrimination. The Church's statement of March 31st, 2016 is one expression of the Church adoption of the UN Declaration. The Caretakers' calls to the Church is another. And it's important to remember that all of this, the apologies, the TRC, the UN Declaration, the Caretakers' calls to the Church, happened because Indigenous peoples made them happen. The question for those of us who are not Indigenous is, how do we respond? How do we embody our apologies and our commitment to the UN Declaration? How do we transform our relationship? Over the next 3 years, we will explore that together through Bible study and theological reflection and worship, workshops, study and advocacy, the deepening our understanding of history, by acknowledging and confronting the issues of today, such as white privilege and systems of violence and exclusion, by building new systems and relationships for a transformed future in a new covenantal relationships with each other and all of creation. So friends, it's a lot we want to share, but we don't have time to have discussions with everybody here and our keynote speaker, and so what we thought we would do is get a fantastic speaker, who I will introduce in a moment, and put together a panel. And so once our speaker is done, we will interact with the panel. We will ask questions from the panel, that we'll have some interaction, and in a sense, they will speak for you, for me. So eventually, I will have the panelists introduce themselves later on, but just for the moment, I'd like you to know that on our panel is Kenji Mariu, who's commissioner and a theological reflector, participant in Australian Reconciliation Dialogue. We have Samantha Miller, who is an Indigenous youth, participant in the Australian Reconciliation Dialogue. Mitchell Anderson, also Indigenous young adult and commissioner. And Beth Symes, Community of Faith, participated in the comprehensive review and engaged in consultation process with Indigenous Church at that time. So that's where we're gonna be in a few minutes. But first, I would like to invite to the stage Michael Redhead Champagne. Michael Redhead Champagne, also known as North End MC, is the founder and organizer of AO. In case you didn't know what that is, that's the Aboriginal Youth Opportunities, a volunteer youth movement from Winnipeg's North End. Michael was born in Winnipeg, family from Shamattawa. Michael is passionate about systems change. He believes that we must work together for the good life. He is a remarkable public speaker, blogger, community activist, but again, it's his passion that we're going to hear tonight, and he believes that we must work together for the good life. With that, I will ask Michael to come.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What's up? Hope everybody had a great dinner. I'm already running away from the camera here. But I hope everybody had a fantastic dinner. My name is Michael Redhead Champagne. It is... Sorry, okay, I'll stop messing around. My name is Michael Redhead Champagne. It is my honor to be here today to share a little bit of information with all of you about some fantastic experiences that I've had, as well as some challenges that I've had, and hopefully provide us an opportunity to talk about how we move forward together. Today, I really wanted to answer two simple questions. The first question, is, what is at risk if we do not commit to deepening the work of reconciliation and relationship building? What is at risk if we leave the apologies as pretty words on a paper? What is at risk if we don't know what to do and we are paralyzed by the fear of not knowing what to do next? But more importantly, I want to talk about where is the hope, because I believe that the hope is in this room. I believe that the hope we can find in one another. I believe that when all nations work together, we can find the hope, but more importantly, we can be the hope. And I think that's something we all need to realize and accept. So, my name is Michael Redhead Champagne. I'm very honored to have this opportunity to spend some time with all of you and begin, and in some cases continue, our relationship. They call me North End MC because I was born and raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba, specifically the North End of Winnipeg, Manitoba. And this is a fantastic, strong, resilient, intelligent, capable community that I believe I blame the North End of Winnipeg for all of the great things and the gifts that I have in my life. Yes, let's give it up for the North End. And so, North End MC is a nickname. And I consider myself to be a helper. In a lot of First Nations teachings, there's an important role for our relationship with Spirit and our relationship in ceremony with one another. And how do we fit as human beings into ceremonies? How do we fit as humans into Spirit? And it is only possible, in my understanding, if we have our helpers taking care of us, protecting us, keeping us safe, sharing their gifts, and fulfilling their responsibilities. I am a speaker. I'm very honored to be a storyteller, not only for the North End of Winnipeg, but also for myself, my natural family, my adopted family, and my chosen family. I'm really excited to be here today as your relative, because something I think you will hear when you travel to various First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities is an acknowledgement of our connections with one another. And I think that we are all related. And when one of my relatives is hurting, so am I. And when one of my relatives succeeds and needs to celebrate, well, so do I. And I think in a family, we don't always agree with each other, but we still gotta love each other. And so today, I stand before you as your relative. And I thank all of you for welcoming me into your family. So thanks to all of you. I think we should just acknowledge all of your graciousness here. Thank you. So there have been apologies, documents, national centers, commissions, and I think it's important for Indigenous and non-Indigenous people alike to be able to reference and connect to how we are going to move forward together. But I find, as a young Indigenous person, that I am often echoing the things that knowledge keepers that came before me have said again and again and again, whether it be the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry in Manitoba from 1991, whether that's the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People from 1996, whether that is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People from 2007, or even the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action much more recently. I want to encourage all of you to take a look at the recommendations contained within those documents, because I think once you do, you'll notice a little bit of repetition. You'll notice that First Nations, Métis, and Inuit leaders for some time have been asking for the same thing. And so often non-Indigenous folks will come to myself or the other young leaders I work with in Aboriginal youth opportunities, and they'll be asked, as a non-Indigenous person, how can I be an ally? How can I help you? And the first thing we always say is do your homework. And it's those reports that I shared with you, but it's also documents and experiences and memories within your own denominations, within your own churches, within your own communities that I think we all need to learn and listen to those who came before so that we can truly achieve healthy relationship with one another, Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike. I think that as we continue to have these types of conversations, there are a number of elements of the conversation we should be paying special attention to. And while I know there is a constant acknowledgement of the intergenerational trauma that young people and Indian residential school survivors' children and children's children feel. I really think that it is important for us not only to acknowledge that intergenerational trauma, but to acknowledge the intergenerational love that has made it possible for me to stand here today in front of all of you. The intergenerational love, thank you. Woo! To me, intergenerational love is the medicine. Intergenerational love is the answer. And when we don't know what to do and we don't know how to get there, the one thing that we can know with certainty is that we need each other and that we are related, and the love that we share with one another is going to carry us through. Now, the work I do in Winnipeg, and actually even my appearance here on the stage here today, I think is somewhat of an interesting and important story. The journey that all of us have been on that have brought us here today to have conversations about the future of our churches, of one another, and of course of our relationships. I really believe that my first experience with the church is something that I need to share with all of you. So, I, as I mentioned, am an Indian residential school survivor's child. My mother went to Indian residential school in northern Manitoba for a number of years. And unfortunately, all of her children were taken into the child welfare system. And so, of course, the connection between Indian residential schools and continued family separation through child welfare systems, I think, is something that we must, of course, acknowledge. And I think that, for me, I was extremely lucky. And how I explain it to folks is that I won what I call the, when I say CFS, I mean Child and Family Services. I know that in some provinces and territories, we have different names. Just for clarity's sake, CFS, Child and Family Services. For me, I won the CFS lottery. I won the CFS lottery because I was first fostered and eventually adopted by a beautiful North End family called the Champagnes. The Champagnes were emergency foster placements to children in the late 1980s to the tune of over 300 children who needed a safe place to be and needed a family to love them. And so growing up with the Champagnes, I saw a tremendous amount of love and a tremendous amount of responsibility from two people who felt a responsibility to care for children that were disconnected or displaced. And in the example of the Champagnes, I was reminded, and to this day am reminded, that it is all of our responsibilities to take care of all of the children all of the time. And to take that even further, and maybe update that a little bit to the new age, the other day I was scrolling through my Instagram feed, and I found a beautiful quotation. And it was very simple, and all it said was this: "There's no such thing as other people's children. No such thing." And so when we begin to treat one another as relatives and as families, and all children as if they are our children, then I think that things can get better. Actually, I know that things can get better. My first experience with the church provided me an opportunity to, well, actually, it was the Champagnes, okay? The Champagnes took me to Sunday school when I was about 7 years old. That was my first experience with the church. And I believe it was Easter because they were learning about the crucifixion. And I don't know if they necessarily had made the connections as to the timing, but as a child that had seen some challenges in my life, some violence, that was a very terrifying story for me. It was a very terrifying story because it talked about treating a human being in a very brutal way. And I was just afraid, actually, of the rhetoric of the Sunday school teacher, because they were talking about he's going to rise again. They were talking about the reasons why this person was being persecuted. And I was absolutely terrified. I was absolutely terrified. And I think really what that did for me was it instilled in me a fear of religion. And it wasn't until I was 18 years old and I actually began to learn the history of my own family and learn about Indian residential schools where I really began to connect many of those dots. So for me, as I was growing up and as I was learning, I really needed to overcome that fear. And I think the best way for us to overcome a fear is simply by building a relationship, by building understanding. And I think that that's really what we need to do on a moving forward basis, all of us here together. We cannot have a relationship based on fear, one where I'm afraid of you or you're afraid of me. We have to have a relationship that's based on mutual respect, a relationship based in equity, a relationship that acknowledges the importance of our relationships to one another. And I think that when we have gatherings like this that open in the beautiful way that this gathering did earlier today, it gives me hope. Where is the hope? It's right here in the room. Where else is the hope? I believe the hope is in Indigenous knowledge. First Nations, Métis, and Inuit knowledge keepers kept this sacred knowledge safe for us through the generational challenges that they faced. And so that today, I am honored to be able to begin learning my own language. I'm Cree. From northern Manitoba, my home community is Shamattawa. In our language, though, we don't call ourselves Cree, we call ourselves Innu. Can you guys say that with me? Say Innu. So that's who I am. I am Innu. And I think as I begin to connect with and learn about language and teachings and our relationship with one another in the land, I feel stronger. I feel happier. I feel like I can do more, share more, help more, and listen more. So that's something that's very exciting for me as I begin to learn my language. I'm at the very beginning. I'm actually quite embarrassed at what the small amount of language that I know. But I'm still doing it anyway, and I want to encourage any Indigenous folks in the room here today, regardless of your age, that if you've been holding off learning your language, I think the time is now for us to pick that up again so that we can learn who we are. So please, let's learn our languages. Let's reclaim those elements of our spirit, and let's be relatives again. And I think my favorite word so far, because I'm just at the beginning, in my language is a term, a concept called Minopamatisawin, the good life. And I know that a lot of folks are talking about reconciliation, and we must, and we should. But I think that if we are to truly get to equitable relationships with one another, we must base our conversations in Indigenous knowledge. Indigenous knowledge should center our conversations. And so anytime I get to talk about reconciliation, like right now, I like to teach people, or at least share, that beautiful teaching of Minopamatisawin. And it's simple. Minopamatisawin means the good life for everyone. Minopamatisawin is not just for Indigenous people. It's for all of us. And within that concept, we believe that we all need to be cared for, and human beings all deserve a good life. We all deserve to be safe. We all deserve a safe place to live. We all deserve food, water, and family. We all deserve Minopa Matsuwin, each and every one of us here today. So with those teachings, I was able in 2010 to connect with other urban Indigenous young people like myself, Indian residential school survivors, children, as well as other young people from the child welfare system. And we made a group called Aboriginal Youth Opportunities, or as we like to call it, Ayo. You guys should say that too, okay? Let's on the count of 3. Everyone say Ayo. 1, 2, 3. Ayo. Hey, there we go. So Ayo, Aboriginal Youth Opportunities, is a youth movement from Winnipeg's North End. We are helpers. We try as best as we can to lead by example. And we all firmly believe that intergenerational love is much stronger than intergenerational trauma. We believe that there are protective factors that keep young people safe from the dangers of violence, suicide, and systemic neglect when they learn who they are. Aboriginal Youth Opportunities is deliberately volunteer-led, which means we do this work because we care, and not because we're getting paid to do so. For too many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children, especially those that are continued to be caught up in child welfare or justice systems, the only ones that care for us in our lives are those who are paid to do so. And this is where our work as a family must continue, and in some cases must begin. As a volunteer movement, the reason that we motivate ourselves in the way that we do as helpers is because we want young people to know that we love them for who they are, not because we're being paid to love them. And we think that that's something that can happen in every single community, every single faith group, every single religion. We think that it's possible to respect each other's relationships with spirit, even if it looks a little different than our own. And I know that Ayo has been working with a number of folks within the United Church for many years. And I know that today I really wanted to amplify and just acknowledge an amazing young leader who made really my journey here today possible. And that's a young woman by the name of Jenna. And if you don't know who she is, very soon I'm sure you will. But she asked for me to acknowledge that there's a couple of folks here in the room, I think they're in the room, that we wanted to just say thank you to. Reverend Evan and Jess, I'm not sure if they're still in the room. I saw them earlier. Recently brought Jenna out to Toronto to talk about reconciliation, and she wanted me to acknowledge them. So wherever you guys are, thank you so much for the fantastic work that you're doing in bringing reconciliation to the forefront. We really appreciate role models and examples like theirs that show us the way forward. My own relationship with the United Church began in 2007 with something called the Youth Leadership Circle. Was anybody here a part of that all the way back in 2007? Thank you. Tell Kofi I said what's up. Okay. Yes. Awesome. So that was a beautiful opportunity for me to connect with folks of a variety of faiths and backgrounds. And we talked about how as young people, we believe we should respect one another's relationship to faith and that we can live together. That was a beautiful experience for me. And it has continued through various facets of the United Church ever since then. Now, Aboriginal Youth Opportunities began in 2010 at the Circle of Life Thunderbird House in Winnipeg. Myself and other Indigenous youth got together and we said, hey, what if we support each other all the time, even if we don't got money? And that sounded pretty good to us. And so since the spring of 2010 all the way to now, We have been loving as best as we can. We have been advocating, amplifying as best as we can. And we have been sharing our gifts with one another. So Aboriginal Youth Opportunities, AO, has really provided me with another family, another group of people who care about what I get up to, what I don't get up to. They do a great job of congratulating me and also kicking me in the butt when I need it. I think that's important. Sometimes truth means we gotta tell people things that they maybe don't want to hear. And I'm very honored to walk with such amazing young leaders who continue to challenge me and push me to be a better human being every single day. And I really want to encourage all of you, as you continue this work and you walk with your First Nations, Métis, and Inuit relatives in your territories, to pay special attention to the young people in those groups. There was a couple of questions just before dinner about youth representation, and I just want to thank the folks that were bringing up the youth representation question, especially at the highest levels, because I feel like that's an extremely important element for us to be reminding ourselves of and engaging in. We must listen to young people, because ultimately it is those young people who will carry on the work that we are discussing here today. So let's do what we can to connect with young people. One of the awesome things we do in Winnipeg is called Meet Me at the Bell Tower. Every single Friday night since November 2018, we have gathered at a bell tower in the north end of Winnipeg, in a public park, on the street. And we meet at that bell tower for a number of different reasons. There was a lot of violence happening in Winnipeg in 2011, and AO unfortunately lost relatives of our family to violence. And so we felt that we needed to bring people together outside of the funerals and the vigils and getting together when tragedy happens. We need to get together before the tragedy happens. And so Meet Me at the Bell Tower provided us an opportunity to get together as Indigenous young people and connect with each other, as well as care for our community. This particular picture that you see comes from a fantastic night that we had, actually, and I feel like Hawaka and Tessa Blakey Whitecloud were both here in this picture. It was the night that we had Meet Me at the Bell Tower welcomes the Muslim community. This was important. This was an important day. And so folks from United Churches in Winnipeg came on out, helped us organize, props to One Just City, and we were able to invite our relatives from the Muslim community to come together, share with us about their life, their culture, and the things that we had in common. There's something we do at Meet Me at the Bell Tower that we call the 4 Fs. The 4 Fs help us plan good community events for everybody. And so the 4 Fs, I'll share them with you. The first F is free. In our neighborhood, unfortunately, there's a lot of folks struggling with poverty, and so financial barriers are often, no matter how small the financial barrier is, sometimes it's too large for folks to be able to overcome. So for us, we believe we must have free opportunities for our community to come together. The second is one that we just finished doing, and that's food, because food brings all of us together. It's a humanizing element. It reminds us that, everybody's got to eat. So food is a critical element to the work that we do. Fun. If you're not having fun organizing an event, I can bet that people aren't going to have fun at the event. So that element of fun is something I really want to emphasize to all of you. If you spent your time just stressing out and not being happy, it does have the potential to come out in the event. And so that element of fun is critical as helpers, as planners, but also simply as human beings. And the fourth and final F, which is, I think, the most important one, you will not be surprised by this, is family. We must welcome families into our spaces, make them intergenerational. I call Meet Me at the Bell Tower an intergenerational classroom. where we all get to share in knowledge and teachings, and it's a rotational instructor model, which means sometimes I get to be the instructor when I know things, but I must have the humility to recognize when I don't, so I can step aside and let somebody else who has a gift to share take center stage and share with the rest of us. The 4 F's, you can do it too. So, one of the things that was so exciting about Meet Me at the Bell Tower when it began was that it started on the very first -40 night of the winter. Something about Mother Nature likes to challenge us when we do important stuff, I think. So we planned our gathering. There was a lot of violence happening. However, we wanted to bring our young people together. So on Selkirk Avenue in the north end of Winnipeg, we asked folks to come, meet up at the bell tower, and we were going to stop the violence. Now, that's a beautiful thought until we realize that a storm is hitting the north part of the city that day. Only the north part of the city, nowhere else. North part of the city, -40, snow and rain. Now, we thought an hour before our very first event that perhaps we should cancel it. Ain't nobody coming out in -40. But here's what we said to the 5 AOs who helped organize that very first event, that even if it's only the 5 of us that show up, that's 5 more people than yesterday. And so even if it was only us, we still wanted to do it. But you can imagine our surprise when we walked down Selkirk Avenue to that bell tower and saw 40 members of our community, what we now call the bell tower family, waiting there for us saying, "We got your back." That's the north end of Winnipeg. That's what we call the bell tower family. And so Meet Me at the Bell Tower was out in -40. We did it anyway. Even some news people came out. So we said, yo, news people, even though it's cold, the community's still out here. We want to stop violence and bring people together. Shortly thereafter, we got a message from a Christian Reformed Church organization called the Indigenous Family Center. They said, hey, you guys look cold on the TV last week. I was like, yeah, thanks. It was pretty cold. And they said, well, we're the building right across the street from the bell tower. We're the Indigenous Family Center. And if you guys want the keys and the code to the building, you can have it every Friday night as long as you put her back together. And so all the way back in 2011, before this concept of reconciliation became such a hot topic, the Indigenous Family Center and that Christian Reformed Church organization, I think, truly understood what that meant. It meant sharing what they had and acknowledging that they had a responsibility to help repair some of the harm that the church had done in the past. And I think that that's important for us to acknowledge, that the church did have a role in separating First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from the protective factors of their culture and identity that allowed us to live Minopamatisawin, that allowed us to live that good life. And so what is the work today? Where is the hope today? The hope today is in congregations and churches all across Canada and Turtle Island doing what they can to repair the harm, helping us find our language, assisting us in connecting with our knowledge keepers to share those sacred teachings with us so that we can be proud of who we are. And here I go again quoting Instagram memes, but it was really, really beautiful for me, I think, recently as I was hanging out on Instagram to read about, does that ever happen where the thing you're about to say just disappears? Yeah, that totally just happened. I apologize for that. So anyway, the moral of the story is that we were able to connect with the Indigenous Family Center. They shared their resources with us, and to this day, continue to have a very loving and giving and generous relationship with us, where they say, we don't want to tell you what to do, but we want to support you in any way that we can. And I think that, to us, that's a living example of reconciliation. And so if you want to know a good person to take a look at or a good church that's doing great stuff, please Google the Indigenous Family Center and check out the fantastic work that they do in assisting families learn about traditional family parenting, folks connecting back to their culture and their ceremony. They believe and subscribe to the belief that two paths can have one journey, and that Christianity and Indigenous teachings can actually live together in the same person. And so we appreciate the respect that was afforded to us and the generosity from that church. And we believe, through their example, that this is possible everywhere. I think the other thing that was really exciting about our work at Meet Me at the Bell Tower is that we were able to connect with a United Church minister by the name of Adele Compton. Hold on, let me see. Oh, the picture that you see here, I just want to, here's the logo for the Indigenous Family Center because I really want folks to know how fantastic they are. But one of the things that made us trust them so much is this beautiful painting that you see here. This is a painting by Indigenous artist Jackson Beardy, and it is called Peace and Harmony. This urban mural is on the outside of their building and reminds us of the connection that we have with one another, and that sometimes our pathways to spirit maybe don't look like ours, but are still very much a pathway to spirit. So this is the beautiful building that offered and invited us into their space, and we still hang out with them every Friday to this day. And so I just want to acknowledge the Indigenous Family Center and the fantastic work that they do, because it really makes a lot of the stuff we do at Meet Me at the Bell Tower possible. There she is. So, Adele Compton, member of the Bell Tower family, but also United Church minister herself, recently in 2014 did a master's thesis on Meet Me at the Bell Tower. And she, you guys should totally write this down, by the way. The title of her master's thesis is Renewed Spirit in Winnipeg's North End, an emerging Aboriginal young adult co-creative leadership model. Very brief. So this Master's of Theology is available online. All of you can definitely download it if you're interested. But I wanted to share a little bit of her findings because I feel like I want to honor the gift that she gave to us of believing in our work. She divided it into 4 chapters. The first one talks about the urban Aboriginal experience of children and youth. Many of the stories I shared with you were present in her research, talking about the reality of colonialism and racism, the poverty that folks experience, as well as various types of violence. The next chapter goes into responding to the violence. And this is where we talk about the work of Aboriginal Youth Opportunities, the 4 Fs and all the good stuff that we try to do. And essentially, she broke it down into these 3 simple ways of understanding. At Meet Me at the Bell Tower, the way we do our leadership is we have a value for the worth of every person. So at our gatherings, we have a prize pile. Okay, every Friday, even though we have a lot of folks that don't have money, we give out tickets so that everybody who comes has a chance to win a prize. Now, where do you get a budget for prizes if you're all volunteers, you may ask? Well, we tell the people that come to Meet Me at the Bell Tower to bring a prize. And we put all those prizes into the middle, and so we never know what's going to happen. Some weeks, we got like a couple cans of pop, but some weeks, the basket overflow. And it's been really exciting to see all of the different ways that we can encourage folks that maybe are living in poverty, that they too can be generous. It's beautiful to see children work on art and bring it to the Bell Tower and say, I don't have any money, but I made a picture for you. Those are the best prizes. And the other thing I think that's beautiful is we have churches and other large institutions that sometimes will sponsor prizes for us, so they bring us a bunch of cool stuff. But often on those days, as cool and nice as the gift cards and the other gifts are, they often don't carry the same weight as the gifts that are given from those who have so little. And I remember there's a 10-year-old girl, was a 10-year-old girl, she's now in her late teens, who often would come and didn't have a lot of money, but she would always scrounge around and she would always find 50 cents. So she could go across the street to the corner store, get a can of pop, and put it in the prize pile. so that she could feel that sense of generosity. Even though she didn't have money, she was able to contribute. And we believe that every person has a value. We also believe that it's important to have, Adele's thesis also believes that we must have a value for relationships. I feel like I've said that enough that I think you know what we're getting at here. But also a value for education, awareness, and skill development. As I said, this is my favorite classroom every Friday night that I voluntarily go to. My tuition is my participation. So it really provides an opportunity for me to go and learn and listen to exciting, dynamic, and cool people in my community. Sometimes it's children and sometimes it's special guests, but provides an opportunity for us to connect with one another and learn together. The next chapter here is chapter 3, which talks about renewed community spirit. This is the result of our Aboriginal co-created leadership model, and she emphasizes how traditional spiritual teachings reinforce positive self-worth, okay, those protective factors I was talking to you about, how those teachings can help us transform from an existence of violence to nonviolence, how that has the potential to renew the spirit of our entire community, regardless of their relationship with spirit, and of course, effective use of social media. Because for too long, non-Indigenous platforms told the stories of Indigenous people. And in 2018, if we're serious about reconciliation, Indigenous voices must tell their own stories. And that's what we believe social media can provide young people an opportunity to do, even if sometimes the things that they say are a little bit risque, a little bit edgy. Now, chapter 4 is, I think, the boldest statement, because chapter 4 is titled, "What Can Meet Me at the Bell Tower Teach the Church?" And we were a little bit scared of this title when Adele was going through this with us, because we're like, whoa, Adele, that's a big statement. The church has been around forever, and Meet Me at the Bell Tower has been around for 3 years. And she said, no, there's something special here that I think the church needs to know. And that talks about the importance of traditional spirituality, connecting to our Creator, learning our language, street ceremony. Okay, something we believe strongly in is street ceremony. All right, so I know that many knowledge keepers talk about the importance of, especially for First Nations folks, getting out onto the land and facilitating our ceremonies out there. But for many people living in the inner city, or at least in the north end of Winnipeg, that isn't always an option. Transportation and finances sometimes make getting out to rural environments where we can be on the land sometimes impossible. And so we believe in street ceremonies. We believe that we can make our neighborhood land sacred. We believe that our traditional teachings can exist within us, around us, whether we're in the city, in the reserve, or out on the land. The other thing we talk about is collaborative leadership. If you guys ever watch geese in the sky, you will see that when the leader of the geese gets tired, they simply move to the back and allow somebody else to take the lead, with the teamwork always ensuring that the geese get to where they're going. Well, to us, that's collaborative leadership, or as we call it, rotational leadership. And that provides everyone an opportunity to know what it's like to have to be the person in the front of the room directing what's happening. And the other piece that is absolutely critical, and why I acknowledged those amazing young people at the beginning who were asking questions about youth representation at the executive level, is that sometimes young people's solutions are amazingly simple, but absolutely critical for all of us to live a good life. And so we have to do what we can in our various spaces to ensure that young people are educated in such a way so that they can understand the system, the process, the policy, and all the kind of dry, boring stuff, so that they can be active participants in designing their own future. Because to me, true reconciliation includes First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from the design phase of any initiative that affects them, all the way to the implementation phase, and of course, in the evaluation phase. And so that, to us, is true reconciliation, where Indigenous communities are allowed to help be the architects of the services and the systems we must interact with. And so, I want to reiterate, what do you think is at risk if we do not commit to deepening the work of reconciliation and relationship building? Where do you see the hope? Because I feel very blessed and privileged to see the hope every Friday at Meet Me at the Bell Tower. I feel blessed and privileged to see the hope in the eyes of Indigenous young people as they reclaim their teachings, learn how to speak their languages, and more bring their families together and say, love is stronger than fear. And our culture and our relationship to spirit is going to help get us to a brighter tomorrow. And so I really want everyone here to think about the relatives that you have in your territory. And I know that for me, I call it Minopamatisawin, because that's in my language what we call it. That's the good life. But perhaps in your territory, there's a word in Inuktitut that is a similar teaching that you need to learn about. Or in Mi'kmaq, or for many of our Coast Salish relatives. We must, and I think we all have a responsibility to one another, but also to those who came before us. Oh, hey, I remembered the one thing I forgot on Instagram, and I think I'll use this to finish. It's something I tell young people, and I totally stole it from Instagram, so shh. And it's this. Your ancestors outnumber your fears. And that's true for all of us, but it's especially true for our Indigenous young people. And to me, it is in those young people where we find the hope. So thank you guys very much for listening to me. I'm excited to go hang out with our panel. Yeah. Oh, that was a good one.
We're watching the slides right now, and I have a feeling there should be audio and not me.
No audio.
Then we'll just watch.
Okay. Hey, it's Stan. Oh, my microphone's still on.
So apparently, friends, you now have the option of continuing to watch the pictures and ignoring us, or listen to us, or multitask. Wow. Just Wow, thank you so much. What I'd like to ask the panel is, while we were having dinner, we had the question, who are you? So perhaps we could actually just, rather than that one-line bio that I threw out at the beginning, you could tell us who you are and how it is you come to be here in this panel. Why, just who you are, however you want to answer that. We'll just sort of go around the panel for that, and then then perhaps we'll come back to the question that Michael gave us there at the end, and that is, what is at risk if we don't deepen relationships, and where do you see hope? But I'll let you think about that while you tell us who you are.
Thanks, Norm. My name is Beth Symes, and I'm a member of Bloor Street United Church. And I am counsel to the Inuit Women of Canada at the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry. And so for me, the challenge has been to realize the distance that we really have to go before we can even begin reconciliation.
Sego sewa gwego, Samantha Youngets nejo hesa, Oshwigan nidiwa geno, wagenyato, dat nu ganyo gehaga. So I just introduced myself in my language, which is Ganyak Gehaga, which is Mohawk. And so what I said was my name, and that is my English name. Also, I am Turtle Clan, and I am from Six Nations.
Idlante Setsene, Sezi Mitchell Anderson Sulye, Hesli Denisuthene Gahasti, Theo Hesli Yelti, Butcha Yelti, Elsa Yelti Kue Knox, Theo Elsa Yelti Kue Nokomis. My name is Mitchell Anderson. Good evening, friends. I am proud to be Denisuthene, and I am in ministry with the good people of Knox United and Nokomis United back home in Saskatchewan.
My name is Kenji Marui. I was born to Japanese-Canadian pig farmers, and seeing how hard they worked and how little money they made, I thought I would become a minister instead. And so I'm in ministry with Calvary United Church in the city of London, which is in Treaty 2 of the Upper Canada Treaties, the McKee Purchase. And I am also past president of London Conference. I'm a doctor of ministry student with Luther Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota, where my thesis project is about how a non-Indigenous preacher in a non-Indigenous church can preach about reconciliation and right relations in a way that is not colonial or patronizing. And I mean, many of us understand the importance and need for such a thing, and we're all terrified about how to do it. So I will be foolish enough to take a few timid steps in that direction. I'm also a parent to two teenagers who may be watching this online. So hello, if you're not watching The Office with my partner. So maybe you're watching, maybe you're not, but this is where I am and what I'm doing when I'm at church things.
Pass you over. Just don't take it personally.
I'm still Michael.
Oh, that's right. You can go anytime you want too. You've got a mic. I realize it's rude of me. I just assume people know me, and how would you? So my name is Norm Seelye, and I have been in ordained ministry at the United Church of Canada for almost 27 years now. And I am at Jubilee United Church in Toronto. And when we were sitting down to eat, Sam asked me who I was. And we talked about it a little bit, and I had identified and mentioned that I am on the Committee for Indigenous Justice and Residential Schools. And she asked me, how did you get on that? And the truth is that an opening came up, and we were asked to discern. And I spent a summer in discernment and prayer, and I felt strongly that God was calling me to sit with people and shut up and learn. And so I essentially wrote that that's what I wanted to do, and the committee said, okay, we'd like to have you. And so I have had a wonderful journey of shutting up and learning. And so I'm going to shut up now, and I want to continue to learn, recognizing that all around us, our hearts and minds are opened up right now. Michael's done a wonderful job of prying open and teasing open and just moving, just opening hearts and minds. And so we're ready to hear from the panel. And if we dare pass it around again, I'd like us to address that question of what is at risk if we don't engage, and where do we see hope? And so I will offer the microphone, and if you don't feel like answering right now, you can pass it on, and we'll get it around to everybody somehow.
Well, here's the challenge. So today, the church voted on 2 remits with respect to establishing a new relationship with the Indigenous church. And that passed. It was overwhelming. But I'm not sure that we all really understand what that will require of us. It's going to be way more than acknowledging the land every Sunday morning. Traditionally, we have treated Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, ministers, and communities of faith the same. Everybody has to go through the same steps to become a minister, to continue to be a minister, to be a community of faith, etc. But, you know, it hasn't worked all that well for the non-Indigenous church, and it certainly was not appropriate for the Indigenous church. And treating everybody the same does not achieve the cornerstone of equity. It's not respectful, and it certainly isn't mutual. It fails to address the past and continuing discrimination, and it's inconsistent with our obligations under UNDRA. Norm talked about a couple of them, but I want to look at 2 others that I think are going to be harder for our church. The right to practice, develop, and teach spiritual and religious traditions, customs, and ceremonies. That is doing things differently. You said very clearly that it is the future, really the hope for young people. And I say until we embrace that, the United Church will be largely irrelevant to Indigenous youth. And it's only by taking up your challenge and opening ourselves to being very different that we're going to be in any way relevant to those who come to the Bell Corner. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. In terms of what I see as at risk, I think that we need to ask ourselves as a people, as the people of God, why we are engaged in the work of reconciliation. And so if I can borrow some words from our brother James, who wrote a great letter that you should read sometime, himself a colonized person writing to colonized people, he said that faith without works is dead. And so I think that in our time, faith without reconciliation is dead. And so I think that if we are going to be people who each week gather and say that we are gathered together because Jesus Christ died on the cross for us, then we have to recognize that in breaking his body on the cross for us, in bearing the weight of colonial power, that in that breaking of his body, he was bringing the broken back together. And so this broken body in our time is being healed by Jesus' work for us on the cross. And in the same way, if Jesus poured out his blood onto the ground for us on the cross, then I have to believe that in making the ground holy, in Jesus' restoring relationship between us and the land, between us and each other, between us and God, that Jesus' atoning and reconciling work for us in his life, in his death, and in his resurrection is why we are here as a people and is why we are engaged in reconciliation. And if we don't engage in reconciliation, then I don't know what it is that we're preaching or what it is that we're doing, but I don't think that it's the good news.
So I would say what is at risk if the church doesn't engage in reconciliation is our very identity as a church, as Christians. I think we lose any credibility at all if we shy away from, well, the things that we talk. It's like we don't believe in repentance. We don't believe in confession. We don't believe in restoration. That's like, if these are things that we preach about but don't live into, I think it gives all the ammunition to the aggressive atheists that point to the church and call us all hypocrites. We can't live or claim this faith if we're not willing to walk the walk. And I would say that that reconciliation itself may in fact be a golden idol that we're putting on a pedestal. I've done some reading for some of my research, and Jennifer Harvey has this book called Dear White Christians. And she, in that book, is talking about how reconciliation can't be the end goal of our journey, that our journey needs to be about reparation and repentance, and reconciliation will be a byproduct of that journey if we engage that honestly. But repentance and reparation, which is the harder path and does not sound nearly as nice as reconciliation. But the hope I heard in what you were saying, Michael, is your emphasis on the need for intergenerational connection. And I think in Canadian society, church is the one place where intergenerational connection can happen. Like, more and more as we get segmented into our own little niches and keep to ourselves and curate our own social bubbles, church is the place where generations come together to meet and interact and learn from one another. And that is the hope. That is the relevance that I think Beth is yearning for too, that the church can be relevant. And I think it is in that place and opportunity for intergenerational connection, and it can be as simple and as hard as that. So that, I think, is the hope there.
Thank you.
So mine is a little different. What I think is, before we can reconcile, we need to share truth. We need to be honest with one another and ourselves. I know a lot of Indigenous youth aren't honest with the past. They like to hide behind or cover it up. Even with non-Indigenous people, they tend to hide behind the apology. And so, for me, to be honest with myself and to ask the bigger question of, what am I doing for my community? So what are you doing for your community? And then start from there. Because if you go out into the world and think on this big scale of, I'm changing, it's simply not going to work. You have to think in your small bubble of, what am I contributing to my community and to other communities? And from there, you build yourself, and from there, you build the community. So with that, the hope is within yourself. You have to find it yourself, and you also have to see it in other people. And hope, what Michael said to me, is a big thing. Not a lot of Indigenous youth have hope because of what has happened or what is occurring. So, yeah, just be true. Don't fake it, because you won't make it.
Michael, you've been listening to us. I would invite you to engage. What do you speak to us? What would you ask any of us? What could we?
Well, I think that I'm just really happy that you just finished with such a simple and strong statement, because it just reminded me of how I hear people say all the time, the best apology is changed behavior. And so that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm excited about. And I think that we see behaviors changing and shifting over time, but the longer it takes our collectives and our communities to change their behavior, the more heartache and challenges we're going to have no choice but to face. And we can't deny that Indigenous young people are facing some real challenges right now. It's unfortunate that we have to reference reports and data before we can convince people to show love to Indigenous young people. Recently, a report was released talking about suicide rates in Canada. And no surprise, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit young people are still very overrepresented in suicide. Those young people didn't see the hope. We have an obligation and a responsibility to those young people and the many other young people that can't find the hope in their life to change our behavior. And if we're going to be sorry, our actions really better reflect that. And I think we have some great representatives here in the circle that do that very well.
Would anyone else like to engage? I just heard Michael say a lot. You look like you're about to say something. I told you my specialty is saying nothing. So do we want to talk about hope in specific ways? Would anyone like to speak about hope, where we see it?
It came to me. Well, I think it was the Instagram closing that you had about your ancestors outnumber your troubles or your worries. And I think hope is a learned behavior, and intergenerational, like we understand that intergenerational trauma happens, that a person's DNA can be changed by trauma and is therefore inherited through, coming generations. I think the persistence of a hope that can transcend that can counteract that intergenerational love, it should have been obvious, but to hear it required me to hear you say those words in order to understand, yes, like this is again what the church should be about, could be about, has to be about.
If you haven't read yet Unsettling the Word, produced by the Mennonite Church of Canada, it's phenomenal. So I recommend you read that. So I was posting a post on Instagram about it, and as one of my attempts to practice learning Denisoothana Yatsie, the language of my people, I posted a bilingual status in English and broken Denisoothana. And so I was looking for a word for decolonizing in Denisoothana, and which of course was kind of an absurd thing to try to find. And so I was looking for a word that meant, what is the undoing of brokenness? What is the triumph of hope over all that is bad? All these things that decolonization means to me. And then I found a word, Danagida, we are rising, or resurrection. And I thought, well, resurrection is clearly the best word that I could find for decolonization, for the undoing of all of these destructive and evil systems. That if Jesus overcame the powers and principalities and triumphed over them, then he triumphed over structural racism, he triumphed over colonialism, and so then Danagida, resurrection, was the best word I could find to capture this spirit of what we were doing. And so, we are the people of the resurrection. We're baptized, we're joined in Christ's death and brought to new life. We're born again through trust in Jesus Christ. So that is what gives me hope, is that Jesus has already initiated the work for us, and we don't need, by our own strength or our own wisdom, to accomplish it, because Christ is the power and wisdom of God. And so we are called to participate in that healing and saving work that's already been begun for us through Danagita, through resurrection.
I think we need to acknowledge that as a church, we have been very active in terms of colonialism and destructive behavior. We were very much a part of residential schools, and recent reports indicate that we must have known or been willfully blind as to the consequences, the impact of our actions. And we've continued that. We've had the 60 Scoop. And today, Michael and I were talking in Manitoba, there are more Indigenous children in child welfare than there ever were in residential school. And it continues, and we are part of it as part of the system. So it's going to take a long time to reconcile. It's not going to happen in the next triennium. It's not going to happen in my lifetime. And in fact, as Maggie Dieter said, we've got to invest in our youth. We've got to put our money and our resources and our hope in our youth, in our Indigenous and our non-Indigenous youth, because it is they who will achieve reconciliation. It's not going to happen overnight. And so we need to do that intentionally. We need to do that deliberately. And we need to put money to make it happen, because it is perhaps our highest priority.
I was very persuaded by a teaching early this morning, standing around the fire in the rain, and the invitation to be good ancestors. The acknowledgement that this isn't going to happen in the next triennium, that we owe this to the generations to come. This is the beginning of relationship. As I had said earlier, this is not marriage counseling. We're not tinkering with something here. We're starting something new, and it takes time. And at the beginning of any relationship, you can't presuppose the ending. You can only be committed to developing that relationship, to learning where it goes. And we are a people of the resurrection. And we are a people of hope. And we know that hope isn't just the likelihood that we will win. Hope means that whether it's likely that we can win or not, it's worth living for, it's worth working for, it's worth it. And that is in our faith, that is the core of our faith, that hope and resurrection. And also I think the humility to recognize we don't do this ourselves. We can't do this ourselves. This is a big thing, but we're not alone. We're not alone. I am becoming aware that it's been a long day. But I'm wondering what we want to send people out here. As we send them out, what do we want to inspire their dreams tonight? What do we want them to continue to wonder as they dream and as they speak over breakfast tomorrow? Would anybody like to share? Okay, you can. You have your own mic.
I think one of my favorite things to I guess push back on respectfully is a narrative that I've heard from folks that have been working for writing relationships for a long time, and it's the sentiment that it's not going to happen in my lifetime. Stop saying that. Because if you say it's not going to happen in your lifetime, it won't. But if we have hope that it can happen, we can't wait another generation. Young people deserve justice today. And so we can't wait. And anyone here who says that, I just respectfully push back against it because Indigenous youth are worth it. And we can be the hope if we live in relationship and lead with our example. So with respect.
I mean, Michael just took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to snap right back. Like, I know a lot of wiser people talk about that, yeah, it's not going to happen. But the young people are waiting. And the young people are like, no, we want it now. Like, for me, I don't want to be wiser and older and wait for my grandchildren to have a better relationship with non-Indigenous people. Like, why can't I live it now? So for me, this will probably be the last thing I say, is you haven't seen me yet. I'm only 18.
Thank you so much for your words. Thank you for not dropping the mic, because they might have made me pay for it. Thank you, panelists, for engaging and for showing us what relationship looks like as we begin. And Michael, I don't have enough words. Just thank you so much for not only your story and your wisdom, but your hope and your invitation. It matters a great deal. Yeah. Friends, I would ask you to sleep well tonight and to dream. And to continue this conversation that's been happening here in the center. Please have it over coffee, have it over breakfast, have it over lunch, have it all week, have it all year, have it with people who've never had this conversation before. We need to not keep this to ourselves. We need to impact those 35 people we impact directly, and the 175 we impact indirectly. We need to change. And we have a song to close us out. Awesome. How about we pray, and then we throw it to Brianne for the song? Okay, so I'm going to ask Mitchell to offer us prayer, and Brianne will play us out.
Tegulti, prions, let us pray. Yadare setaneni astinezu, God help us to pray in a good way. God, we ask that as we've had these difficult conversations this day and all our days, that your Spirit might be at work in us, disturbing us, challenging us, blowing us to and fro according only to the ways that you would send us. Where we have been broken, help us to repent and to heal. Help us to trust always in you and in the ways that you are leading us. And this we pray in the strong and reconciling name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
So this song is called Two Boats of Kin, and we're going to be singing it at another time throughout the council. But I invite you now, just in closing, to sit and center yourselves, perhaps close your eyes, and just let the words wash over you. It's based on many of the statements that you saw playing through the slides, both the call for the United Church to apologize and the response to that apology. Two boats of kin a quest begin across the river deep. With bounty shared, it was declared a course that each would keep. But one both thought they should have more, cracked covenant, squeezed one to shore. Let us relearn our script, own our whole truth in the life the Spirit gives. With wind and waves and sacred flames embodied from the land, though same in heart you could not see trace of Creator's hand. Through cross and pen you sought remake our names and children you did take. We say repent your acts, respect our voice in the life the Spirit gives. We try to make you be like us, we basketed your light. We did not heed the cries of babes, abused the gospel's might. Our role in pain we must accept, apologies through justice kept. We'll now confess our deeds, open our eyes in the life the Spirit gives. Two bolts of kin a quest begin across the river deep. Awareness shared, it was declared, joined vision they would keep. What we do now in strength and love, our children see and rise above. Let us unite our hearts, unite our minds in the